Hey, Montel Williams here. Look, I've got some incredible news to share with you. I want to tell you about my brand new book that's coming out that's called The Sailing of the Intrepid. Now, this book is more than just an historical account. It's a tribute to the brave men who served aboard the USS Intrepid and a celebration of their extraordinary legacy. Writing this book was such an incredible story, and I'm really thrilled to be able to share it with you. So don't wait to grab your little piece of history. The book is available right now to order. You can go to montelmedia.com, and you can even get a limited autograph signed copy. Now, thank you so much for your support. I can't wait for you to read this incredible story of the sailing of the Intrepid. I'll see you on the pages. Hey guys, welcome back to Free Thinking with Montel, where we explore the ideas, stories, and themes shaping our world today. I'm your host, Montel Williams, and today I'm thrilled to welcome a guest who brings a truly unique perspective to the table. He's an author, a veteran, a former Foreign Service officer who has spent decades on the front lines of diplomacy, experiencing the very highs and lows of global politics. His name is Otho Eskin, and he's here to talk about his new book, Black Sun Rising, a gripping thriller that feels almost too close to reality in today's political climate. The book explores themes of power, corruption, and extremism that aren't just fiction, but mirror the real world, and mirror real-world challenges we're facing here right now in the United States and across the globe. Otho, it's an honor to have you here. Welcome to Free Thinking, sir.
It's my pleasure to join you. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. Look, before we jump into your book, I want to take the audience back a bit to your fascinating background. You served in the U.S. Army, you were a diplomat with the Foreign Service, and you're now a novelist. That's quite a transition. Let's go back and talk how your career evolved.
Well, after I finished with the Army, I also am a lawyer, so I got a law school fit in there somehow. And after law school, I was accepted into took the examination for the United States Foreign Service and was accepted and spent the next 25 years approximately in the Foreign Service. About half that time I spent in Washington, about half that time overseas, either assigned to U.S. embassies in various countries, or in some cases I was traveling around the world negotiating or being part of negotiating teams working on international agreements. After I retired, I decided I'm always active, and so I didn't want to just sit down and watch TV. No reflection on TV, you understand. But I needed to be active, so I started writing plays. I'd always been interested in the theater as an observer, and I started writing plays. I wrote about maybe a dozen or so altogether. Several of them were written and produced in Washington, D.C. and in New York, and more recently one was produced in London. And I wrote plays for some years, and then I decided I thought I needed a stretch. I needed to try something different. So I decided to undertake writing fiction, in my case, genre fiction, which was thrillers. I don't know quite now why I chose that rather than something else. It just appealed to me. I read those kinds of narratives, and I thought that they got captured by them, and I thought I'd like to try my hand at that myself. And that's what I've been doing for the last approximately 5 years. This is my fourth book, and in the series, the thriller series, and that's where I am today.
If you could put us in kind of try to give us a perspective or put us into the timeline of your Foreign Service. Are there any incidences or places that we may know from history that you were involved in?
Well, no, I suppose. I mean, my first assignment was in Syria, and those were not good times for U.S. Diplomacy in the Middle East. Well, worse now, of course. I don't think during my stay there. There were several attempted coup d'état. People tried to overthrow the regime. In my time, they failed, but that was I'm sure it was in the news. My next assignment was in Yugoslavia, what was then Yugoslavia. It doesn't exist as a country anymore. It was now. I was in Belgrade, the capital of Serbia. In those days, it was run with an iron hand by Marshal Tito. Things were pretty calm in my time. Shortly after I left, the whole country blew up and tore itself apart, and with an enormous amount of bloodshed and violence. And it's still calming down. My third assignment was in Reykjavik, Iceland. Very democratic, calm, small country. Everything went very smoothly. We had a couple of big issues with Iceland at the time. I mean, when I say we, I mean the United States government. And but it was being a democratic society. It was all very peacefully worked out. My final assignment abroad was in Berlin during the Cold War. I was there in East Germany when Berlin was the capital of the German Democratic Republic. I was obviously living under a very tough communist regime, and nothing got out of hand, because when you're in that kind of authoritarian regime, they have policemen everywhere, and they don't allow things to get out of hand. So it was, in one sense, very calm. Of course, I was under surveillance, as everybody else in the embassy was. We were all treated as enemies and probable spies. I wasn't a spy, although I was accused of being a spy, but it was in one sense, a very calm experience. I mean, I lived with my family there. We knew we were under surveillance. When I would meet with people, I knew that those meetings would be reported. But one gets used to it. I lived within about 3 or 4 blocks of the Berlin Wall, and because the food in East Germany was so execrable, I used to go across the wall to have lunch in West Berlin. And so you can see it in one sense, a very normal existence, in another sense, totally bizarre. Of course, all that's gone now. The East German regime was collapsed in 1990. The wall's been torn down, and Berlin is a different city. But that doesn't give you an overview, I hope.
Sure, absolutely. And your book, Black Sun Rising, is deeply resonant with current events. It deals with themes like rising extremism and erosion of democracy. Can you tell us a little bit more about the story and what inspired it?
I'll be glad to try. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
The story is in essence about a plot by neo-Nazis to assassinate the president of the United States and overthrow the U.S. government. Obviously, totally fictional, but I base it on what I see as a trend in this country. People speaking the language of fascism, of totalitarianism, authoritarian regimes. I don't think we're certainly not there now, but I began to see the trends in the public discourse about that. We're leading what, in my view, we're creating the groundwork for a possible turn to a authoritarian regimes. As you know, I'm sure it happened in Europe in the 1930s, not only in Italy and in Germany, but in Romania, Portugal, Spain, and it came close to happening in England and France. And it also came close to happening in the United States. There were right-wing regime change movements in this country. The World War II put an end to that, or I thought it put an end to it. And for the several decades after, during the regime of Dwight Eisenhower and the Bushes, we seem to be living in a country free of fear from right-wing extremists. But then in recent years, certainly in recent months, I see in the public dialogue, if you can call it that, public debate, more and more of talk which sounds just like what was happening in Europe in the 30s and in the United States in the 30s. And people appearing to appeal to an authoritarian one-man rule. And I decided to work on with that theme and to create a fictionalized narrative in which a real neo-Nazi organization plots the overthrow of the U.S. government. It's totally fiction, of course, but in my story, a DC homicide detective by the name of Marco Zorn gets himself involved in discovering and in exposing this plot. His partner is murdered by these neo-Nazi organization, and he is directed by the superiors to infiltrate this Nazi organization, which is called Black Sun. And it's a real organization created at the end of World War II by surviving Nazis. And he finds his way into the system and finds himself in a Nazi training camp that's been established in Virginia to create a militia, Nazi militia. And from there, he has to expose the true leader of the Black Sun and stop them. All of which is going on while he has to. He learns that at the end of World War II, as the Nazis developed a secret weapon, it was a poison gas, which Hitler intended to use as his last resort to protect Berlin. He did not use it, and it was never used. It's called Cyclone, and some of your viewers may recognize that name because it was a real poison gas which the Nazis used during the World War II in the camps. So the story is my protagonist, Marco Zorn, learns about this poison gas, learns that the plot is going, has no idea who's behind it, who's financing it, and who the personnel are. But he infiltrates this system and, well, without giving away the ending, deals with it.
It's so interesting. I mean, you mentioned parallels with the 1930s. It's chilling to think that some of these tactics associated with the past could resurface the way they had been resurfacing here today. How do you see this happening in America right now? Do you see any parallels to what you've written to what's going on in the country today?
I do see parallels. If you ask me, is it going to happen here? I say, I don't think so. I really have confidence in the common good sense and goodwill of the American people. And I don't think, given the choice of an authoritarian Nazi regime, that they would embrace it, they would reject it. But maybe that's wishful thinking. In any case, I see the groundwork being laid. Anti-Semitism, sexism, all kinds of treatment of minorities in the worst possible way. And I think what's happening is that people have lost a sense of decency. Well, I don't mean the whole country has, but a lot of people seem to have forgotten what this country is about. And I think, and they're allowing themselves to listen, particularly on mass media, of the most awful kinds of nonsense, well, not nonsense, worse than nonsense, worst kind of language and ideas. The violence we see just recently in the last few days. I'm not saying that's a Nazi plot, but the fact that this kind of thing is happening tells me that it's being tolerated in a way or accepted
Being
tacitly,
normalized.
and we need to get beyond that, because if it continues to go that way, anything will be acceptable.
Absolutely, especially if we normalize these behaviors. I mean, it seems as if, the extreme comes in the forefront and then everybody reacts, but then it doesn't take two steps back, it takes a half a step back.
Yes, that's
Then
right.
it pushes even more. And so what happens is what was tolerated yesterday, what wasn't tolerated yesterday is tolerated today. And
Yes.
trust, diplomacy, mutual respect. You wrote an op-ed piece recently about how the U.S. is losing its footing on the world stage and the impact of slashing foreign service. Can you expand a little bit more on that?
Well, I'm very deeply concerned with that. I think we, in the past, since World War II, during the war, we created uh, 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 efforts by like-minded countries, our allies in World War II, and that continued in the post-war period. And we've created in NATO, in the European Union, and in Asia, close bonds, cooperation with like-minded countries, even where we had differences, even where there were financial trade differences. We had created a system of cooperation and self-help. Uh, that seems to be wearing thin. I don't know why. I have theories, but I think what's happening is that uh, the United States is treating our traditional allies as a nuisance. We don't care what they think. And we sometimes seem to care more about authoritarian regimes, such as in China and in Russia, um, and neglect the people who have been close allies with us for decades and who come to where we need help and where we need cooperation. They're there. We can work together, and we seem to be having a hard time working together. American diplomacy seems to be turning into kind of bullying, and that's no basis on cooperation. The fact is even though the United States is the most powerful country in the world, financially, economically, the most thoroughly strong country, we can't do it by ourselves. We need cooperation. We need other countries to work with, and we will continue to. I hope to do that. But what we're seeing now is neglecting traditional diplomacy. We act as if we can do it alone, or we can do it with other like-minded authoritarian regimes. Well, we can't. That's been proven time and again in history. You can't do these things by yourself. The United States needs friends, needs to cultivate cooperation, and we need to see that our traditional allies are continue to be allies and not become suspicious and uh, and, uh, and suspicious and hostile to us, because we're never going to get out of that.
Well, as a country that seems as if we need to stay interconnected with the world as the U.S. should do, it seems as if we are living under a leader who right now only wants to maintain relationships with authoritative, dictatorial nations. And at the end of the day, they are not representative of the majority of the world right now.
No, certainly not. And also, they don't have Americans' best interests. Ultimately, they're hostile. Russia wants to take over the old Soviet Union territories, which would threaten Western Europe. It seems as if our government doesn't care whether Europe is being threatened or not. China certainly is not acting in U.S. interest. It wants to control international trade. Perfectly understandable from their point of view, but that doesn't work for the United States. These countries, I mean, other countries too. I mean, France, England, Germany, they all have their interests. Not all of them are exactly in line with the interests of the United States. But we have established a system of cooperation that allows us to work through these problems. In the case of Russia and in China, or North Korea, if you want to take an extreme example, we don't have the basis of cooperation. We're basically toe to toe enemies, and as soon as something goes wrong, and something will go wrong, we'll be in a hostile territory, and that can lead. I'm certainly not predicting this, but that can lead to war. And these countries that we're being cozying up to are nuclear powers, and they are not democratically led nuclear powers. They can do things that are totally destructive, and they don't have an obligation to their own people to justify what they do. Unlike, say, the countries.
And at the same time, although it seems to me like, I mean, at the end of the day, their objective towards destruction is, if they can't control it, then destroy it all and let's start again. I mean, I don't understand. I have a hard time figuring out what is the end game for China and Russia. You want to be the world leaders, okay, but what does that mean? Does that mean that everybody then sends taxes to you? Everybody lives under your umbrella? I don't understand exactly where. I mean, it used to be where foreign service and diplomacy seemed to mean, putting together a program or something that helped your country, your citizens live at a standard that, was commensurate with the rest of the world. Now it seems as if countries aren't going to be satisfied unless they actually control another country. I mean, and cutting back on diplomacy the way this particular administration is doing, I don't see how that gets us anywhere.
Yeah, well, I don't happen to agree. Of course, I'm prejudiced because I spent a entire career in doing diplomatic work, and I believe in it. It doesn't always work. You don't always succeed in achieving your goals, but we create conditions of, peace and cooperation. We're now creating a world condition of friction and hostility, and that will not help us in our objectives. We have obviously we want to have financial and trade objectives, and we need, and in order to achieve those, we need to keep our friends close to us. We
and our enemies closer. Yeah, no, go ahead.
That's right. You ask about what the objectives are. I don't know. I think maybe our government feels more comfortable with authoritarian regimes because, but I can't for the life of me tell you why. It seems on the face of it inexplicable because you can, when you're dealing with a democratic country, let's say Germany. Germany just had elections. Italy had elections. New governments come in. That may create different new conditions, new problems, but new opportunities as well. And if you create the basic foundation for cooperation, you can continue to work with them. with these authoritarian regimes, and I'm thinking specifically of Russia and China, you're not going to worry about elections. Nobody's going to overthrow the leader of either country, not in the foreseeable future, any case. And so, in one sense, it's a given. You know what to expect from these regimes, but I don't see where that gets us. We don't have.
I mean, I don't understand where it gets them either. I mean, you look at China. At the end of the day, if China wants to rule America, they'd have to put, and they do have a population big enough to do it, they'd have to put a soldier on every street corner in America. And they have the military capability of doing that. However, at the end of the day, what good does it do them? They're not going to be here, checking in on everybody going to work and making sure that you go to work and you come home from work and you go home. And I just don't understand at the end of the day what the future objective would be. I don't understand what the international objective would be. You're not going to ever be able to, to take over America. You take over a country where its population has more guns than its population. You're not going to rid the America's households of every weapon that's here. So therefore, there's going to be conflict and into the foreseeable future and beyond. So I just don't understand what the line is, where the objective is in some of this international diplomacy.
Well, one thing is, I don't think that either China or Russia really aims to take over the United States. I don't think that there's any situation where it's likely that they would permit that. But I think in the case of China, they have their interest is trade. They want to have dominate world trade and world economy, and they have the capability of doing that. The United States is the only country, virtually the only country, that can stop them from doing that. Russia is different. Russia doesn't have any, I don't think, has any fantasies of taking over the international trade. They are essentially a weak economic country. But what they want to do is reestablish the old Soviet empire, and that means challenging Western Europe. And if we abandon Western Europe, which is what it sounds like we're doing, we lose our closest allies in Europe. And if there ever was a conflict, we would find ourselves alone. I think that is the worst possible expectation and outcome. If both China and Russia achieve their goals, the United States would be weakened financially and in trade. We'd lose our allies, and we would lose our military edge all around the world, because we wouldn't be able to have any more allies and cooperating governments. And that's what I think both China and Russia aim at, basically weakening the United States and reducing it to just another kind of like Mexico or Guatemala or something like that. Not quite that. We'll always have an industrial base, but nothing like we have now, and we would lose our military superiority around the world, as we would lose our friends and allies.
But as we think about that in terms, I don't know. When I look back in a century ago, having this military that seems to be so superior to everyone else on the planet, unless that superiority turned into aggressive, offensive actions, what difference does it make? I mean, you're going to have the most that we could keep spending the amount of money we're spending right now. We're never going to get invaded. This country is never going to have ships pull up to the shores, offload 10, 20 million troops, and put one on every street corner, because that's what it would require. It would require that in America for you to take over the American spirit. Yeah. So what do? You take over the other countries that were trading partners of the United States, and you limit their ability to trade outside of the United States. At the end of the day, does that weaken us as a nation? It weakens us financially, but again, unless you had a soldier in every corner, it ain't going to make a difference either.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you.
So, what do you think this objective is at the end of the day? I mean, if China knows and Russia knows, they're never going to invade America and make America their 51st state.
That's not realistic. Short of a nuclear war, there's nothing they can do to the United States other than bankrupt us, which is what I think China would like to see, and so that we're reduced. We're no longer a superpower financially, and right now we are a superpower militarily, and I assume we will remain so. But if we don't have any friends and allies, it doesn't do any good. So it's
right, but it doesn't do them any good to weaken us financially because we're the buyer of a lot of their goods. So it's like, it's almost a stalemate in the sense that, I often ask, what do you want?
Well,
at the end of the day, what do they want, huh?
They wanted us to continue
bragging
buy. China wants us to continue to buy all their products. They just want to do it on their terms, not on our terms. And they'd like to see us, the United States, reduced financially and economically, so it doesn't compete with China. I think China visualizes itself as the dominant economic power on Earth, and it's moving in that direction. And militarily, the United States is still an equal or superior to China, but without the economic basis, it won't do us any good. I think you could visualize a world in which the superpowers, I'm thinking the United States, Russia, and China, can live with one another, but in that situation, in the worst possible scenario, the United States would no longer have any friends and allies, and would no longer dominate world trade as our industry and our research shrivels. So it doesn't mean the end of the world. It doesn't mean that China would invade or Russia would invade, because that's just not realistic. But it would have the effect of reducing America to a second-rate world power.
And do you see the themes that are in your book, Black Sun Rising, as more than just being a thriller? Is this a kind of a call to action?
Well, I don't want people, I'm hesitant to say yes, because I don't want crazies to go out there and buy a gun and take action. I don't want to see whether you're left or right or whatever. I don't want to encourage people to take personal action. But yes, if you mean in the broader sense, political action, yes, I definitely want people to become aware that we're drifting into a fascist regime, and we need to stop it before it gets out of hand. And but it has to be done through the ballot. It has to be done through the electoral system, not through violence.
And is that why your novel touches on such heavy historical themes, and you tried to blend them together, these elements together into the story?
Yeah, absolutely, that's what I tried to do, and I wanted to get people aware that this is going on, and become active, whether they're left or right or whatever. But I don't think Americans want a regime, a one-man rule regime in our country. And I think all you need to do is start paying attention. Well, I say all you need to do. It's not that simple, but you need to get active politically, vote. Who's running for office at your local level, at Congress, and at the presidential level, and take what people are saying seriously. It can't. If nobody people sit back and say, well, that's the way things are, it's going to get worse, and eventually it'll get to the point where you can't reverse the trend. So I think we need to start. It's not too late to become politically active, whether you're conservative or liberal or nothing at all. And I need to, and you need to see who's running for office, see who's at your local district council. All of that is what's called for right now. And I think it's not too late, but I think I'd like to see it happen today.
Now, do you think fiction, especially a work like Black Sun Rising, and a matter of fact, before we talk about it, where can people go to get a copy of the book?
Well, you can get it at Amazon, of course, or at your local bookstore, or yes, in any place that sells books. It's just been published a couple of days ago, so it should be available online or in person at your local bookstore.
And do you think books like this have the power to create real world impact and change perspectives?
Well, that's a very good question, and I don't have a smart answer. Uh, there are times when I think no, people read books like this for entertainment. They enjoy it. Once they finish the book, they go back to their normal lives. But there are books, of course, that have made changes. Uh, I think there was books written in the 30s about neo-fascist, or at that time not neo-fascist movement in this country, and I think that created an awareness that there was a risk going on. It's hard to document that. I don't know how you'd prove it one way or the other. Um, there are, of course, classic books. Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, which I just opened, the musical just opened here in Washington at Kennedy Center. I suspect that created an atmosphere in France in the mid 19th century that could not have been done by any other means. It's very hard to prove or document these things, whether it's books, movies, or any other art form. I like to think as an artist that it has an effect. If you're doing the job well, you can have far-reaching influences one way or the other. But I can't prove it, and no, I don't think there's any way to demonstrate the effect of books or movies or plays on the political system.
So I thought, what kind of research did you undertake to ensure historical elements of Black Sun Rising were accurately reflected in reality?
Well, I did do research into the organization of Black Sun. There are books about it, and you can get a lot of information on the internet. It's not really a very secret movement. I, of course, took the raw material and elaborated it into a complex international plot, which goes beyond the reality, because I needed that to drive the narrative. But beyond that, I just basically read the newspapers. I watched news on television, and to some extent, just listen to the mass media to get a sense of the tone of a lot of this stuff that's being talked about. Things are being said that really struck me, that people say publicly now what they would not have said publicly to a year ago or 5 years ago, certainly.
And isn't there a sense of societal apathy that some of your characters seem to be deeply affected by the consequences of? I mean, and you say you pay attention to the news and you watch, but I've heard so many people say I'm just sick and tired of the news. I'm not going to watch it anymore. And in a way, by checking out, you become you don't become less affected. You just become less knowledgeable about what's going on around you, right?
Yes, right. If you can't. Well, I have to say, I after the last election, I sort of dropped out myself, but that's my peculiarity. Yes, if you become apathetic, if you pay no attention, if you think, well, that's nothing I can do about it, I'm just one person and I don't care, well, then it's going to go down the rabbit hole. It's going to go bad and turn sour. So you don't want to be apathetic. Uh, I encourage people to be activists, but not absolutely avoiding violent activists. That is a fine line. You get people charged up about an issue, perfectly legitimate issue, and then if they get really excited, they get a gun and shoot somebody. And I don't want to ever see that happen. Not in this country, no, or any country for that matter. We have too much violence, guns and other forms of violence available easily, and it's just encouraged on mass media. So, but people should step back, listen to their neighbors, listen to people, particularly try to listen to people who take a different position, even if it's a position you find offensive or objectionable. Listen to them, try to figure out what they're trying to get at, and get engaged in a debate, not a violent one, and not yelling and screaming and using curse words. That just riles up the opposition. So you got to get engaged, but in a civil way.
Is that what you hope? Is that what you hope the reader will take away on an emotional level when it comes to when they finish Black Sun Rising?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
I mean, I'm saying, is that what you hope the reader will take away on an emotional level after they finish reading?
Well, I wanted the first objective was to make the reader aware that change the political tone in this country is changing. And it's changing not for good, but for bad. It's changing in a dangerous way. That was A. And B, if one become aware of that, try to, in an individual way, try to calm things down. Try to find a way of carrying on a civil discourse with everybody, and stop yelling and screaming at one another. Those would be my objectives.
You've also spoken about the importance of vigilance in protecting democracy. How do you see people applying this message in their everyday lives?
Well, not easy to do. As I say, I think if people can engage in political activity, that is to say, voting once every 2 years, or wherever they can in their local community, if they can attend district councils or even school board meetings. A lot of the controversy seems to be centered around schooling and teaching. Go there and try to be introduce a note of calm and rationality. That's a small step, I realize, but I don't see any other alternative to trying to calm down and return American political society to one of decency and rationality.
What's been the response from your book so far that you've been able to tell?
Well, in the future,
no, the response to your book so far. It's been out for a couple of weeks, right?
As far as I can tell, it's just been published. I haven't seen any reviews. I think it's been very positive. At least the people that I've talked to, and of course, those are people that friends and family. So I would expect them to be positive. But yes, I think, generally speaking, I think it's been a very good response.
And before we wrap up, what message would you like to leave with our audience, especially during these turbulent times?
Cool it. Try to behave in a rational and civilized way to your neighbors, your friends, You don't want. We don't want the whole country to devolve into a rabid argument. There are things to be said on all sides, and you listen to the other side. If you don't agree, you dispute it, you take issue, and you point out your interlocutor's errors, but you try to work with them to try to find some common ground. And I do believe that in this country there is a great deal of common ground where the people can find common interests, even if they don't give up their deepest convictions. They can find areas of cooperation, and that's what we need to do.
Powerful words, Otho. Powerful words. I want to thank you so much for joining us today, for writing this book that challenges us all to think deeply about the state of our world. For listeners who want to grab a copy of the book, it's called Black Sun Rising. We'll learn more about Otho's work and then go to othoskin.com.
Okay.
That's othoskin.com.
No, Otho Eskin.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Otho Eskin. Eskin.com. There you go. That's OTHOESKIN.com.
Right, you got it. That's correct.
And Otho, thank you so much for being part of the show today. And for our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Free Thinking with Montel. Stay informed. Make sure that you literally reach out and try to bridge a gap. You know what I mean? Reach out every day. Try to bridge a gap. If you can, that's what will make us all much stronger. And don't forget to subscribe and share an episode of Free Thinking with Montel with a friend, okay? And until next time, we'll see you then. Free Thinking with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Free Thinking with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear feedback, so please send us your comments. Military Makeover is so grateful for the support of Purple Heart Homes, a nonprofit organization that rebuilds and transforms the homes for our veterans.
Our heroes come home with sacrifices most of us can't imagine. As a veteran myself, I've been there and founded Purple Heart Homes to help.
When I tell the story of Purple Heart Homes, it's the freedom to not have to depend on somebody else to do the simple everyday things in life.
Visit phhusa.org/makeover to learn how you can help.